Number 2, why especially the river? Was there a particular inspiration? Why the change from the schematic original diagram to the metaphorical view? Very good question. Well, most theory that we encounter in the world today in the fields of science and even occupational therapy have been greatly influenced by that rational, Western, logical view of the world. In fact, it's the scientific world that gave us theories. And theories are supposed to be really quite logical representations or explanations of complex phenomena. And so the progression of A plus B plus C equals D in a straight line is kind of like the format of what we call linear theory in science as well as in occupational therapy. And many of our models in occupational therapy that are familiar with us, to us, such as the PEO model or MOHO or the Canadian model of occupational performance, they're all made up of discrete concepts that are sometimes depicted by boxes or circles and are connected together, and there is either an implied or explicit use of arrows or some kind of progression to show the relationship between all of the different parts. Well, when I first went about trying to build a new model of occupational therapy, we wanted to build a model that resonated with, or in other words, the local people, ordinary people, not therapists, not scientists, not scholars in the university, ordinary people in everyday life could understand this new model that we were trying to develop. So when I first started developing the Kawa model, I thought we should make things into boxes in the same way that I understood models when I lived in Canada and worked as an occupational therapist there. But given that the Japanese Eastern philosophical view of the world is one in which all things are connected and things are fluid, and where one change in one part of the system affects the entire system, the initial model or schematic that we came up with, as you can see, is very much reflective of that kind of thinking. Boxes inside of a circle connected together by arrows going in all kinds of different directions. So one of the Japanese colleagues that I was working with, they were all clinicians or practitioners of occupational therapy, they said, this is too difficult to understand with the boxes and things. It's not good enough. It doesn't mean very much to me or my clients in Japan. So there was a popular song in Japan at the time sung by a very famous diva who is now passed away from old age. Her name was Misora Hibari, and she sings a classic song. The name of the song is called As the River Flows. In Japanese it's known as Kawa no nagare no yoni. Kawa meaning it's the Japanese word for river, or flus in your language. And this song was about the life journey. It's a song about an elderly woman who, before she dies, she follows the footsteps up the path along a river back to her place of birth. And as she goes along the river, she reminisces and thinks about all of the good times and the bad times, the trials and tribulations, as well as the triumphs in life, and metaphorically speaks about this. It's a very popular song in Japan. It's one that most people know, especially middle-aged people and older people for sure. And she said, one of my colleagues said to me, we can explain this model in a better way that makes sense to a lot of Japanese people, and that is in the metaphorical pattern of a river. A river is one in which if you take a cross-section, you will see that there is no distinct concept for the person, but rather it's made up of river walls and sides that determine the basic flow of water, which is symbolic of life. and the river walls can constrain and come apart, as you know. There are rocks and driftwood that appear in the river, but the whole thing is depicting the self, and the whole thing is depicting the context as well. All of these elements are connected. You change one element, you drop a big rock in the middle of the river, and it changes the flow, and it changes the river. It's not the same as it was before. So that's why the river metaphor was used. Now let me just say that if the river metaphor does not work for your client, consider putting it aside and choosing a better model to use, or even a better metaphor. I remember once a German young man, a student of occupational therapy, suggested that instead of the Fluss model, it should be the Autobahn model. Instead of life being like a river, I guess as a 21-year-old young German male with lots of testosterone flowing through his body, that he thought life is not like a river, it's like a superhighway without any speed limitations. And like life, there are slowdowns and traffic jams, and there are times when the traffic will go very, very quickly and a crash will result. Such as life. There are on-ramps and off-ramps and so on and so forth. So that's something to keep in mind. It will help you to determine when the river metaphor is the best one to use and when it isn't. I use it as a starting point in my interactions with clients, and it is a nice way to begin to get an idea of what it is that that is going on in the client's life in a way and in words that I as a therapist can understand. And in turn, I can use that same river metaphor to also communicate to the client in a way that the client can also understand. So think about this. The river metaphor is actually a vehicle of understanding and communication that goes back and forth between you and the therapist. In the middle is this metaphor of a river, and we use it first to try to understand and appreciate as best as we can what the client's experience of everyday life is like. And once we identify what those issues are, then the occupational therapist can use their skills and their knowledge in a way that is going to help that person in a way that makes sense with them, that resonates with their reality.